This is the RPGamer.com review for Ys Origin on Nintendo Switch. 700 years before the trials and tribulations of the heroic Adol, the goddesses Fina and Rhea depart from the floating civilization of Solomon's Shrine to the world of Ys below, which has become contaminated by demonic energies. Desperate to know why, a search party departs for the surface from the shrine high above to chase after the twin deities. Ys Origin is a simple game in structure. Rise through the 25 floors of an eerie tower with one of three characters, and discover the events that eventually lead to a slew of adventures for a certain redhead many hundreds of years later. Though the game has some flaws and is starting to show its age a little, the fast-paced combat system and compelling trifecta of stories means Origin remains a strong title in the Ys series. The story of Origin is told from three distinct perspectives, though the tales do have some overlap. To begin, players have two tales to pursue, with a third becoming available once both of those are completed. Even though all three characters are climbing the same tower, each story has its own twists and turns inside of the larger tale, making the process of going through them all actually pretty worthwhile. As a prequel, the story is limited in scope and a little predictable, but does an excellent job carrying those multiple playthroughs. How combat work depends on the character being played, but no matter which protagonist is on the climb, combat feels really smooth and there's an incredible sense of satisfaction while taking down enemies. And that's everything from the smallest oozling to massive bosses. Unica is the most similar to Adol. She is a middle-range attacker and lacks any magical powers, but her big axe and elemental abilities more than make up for that weakness. On the other hand, Hugo is a magical prodigy, and while he focuses on long-range attacks, he does still have a limited repertoire of abilities to get enemies out of his face. Each character has a boost mode that enhances their combat. For Unica, this means a straight-up strength boost, along with immunity to some attacks, while for Hugo, this means his magical beam-shooting eyes increase from 2 to 4. Despite each having a distinct style, the sense of enjoyment when mowing down enemies left and right really transcends character of choice. Players will need to combine together these movement skills and well-timed jumps to get through some of the most hard-to-reach places, but being able to open that chest that looked impossible to get to is incredibly satisfying. As the player explores the tower, new gear will become available, though most of these are slightly off the beaten path, so you'll need to explore to find all of the equipment available for your character. Players should also be on the search for Selcedon Panacea, which provides a permanent hit point boost. While missing one of these upgrades isn't a deal breaker on easier modes, every upgrade matters on the higher difficulties. Each piece of equipment can be bolstered further by cashing in SP, which is earned from defeating enemies, at the goddess statues scattered around the dungeon. How much of a bonus these upgrades bestow depends upon the difficulty chosen. SP can also be used to buff characters in a variety of ways, such as improving resistance to status effects, running faster, or recovering MP for skills rapidly. Last but not least, the trio of adventurers will discover a variety of accessories to facilitate their trek up the tower. Some of these must be explicitly equipped, such as hallowed chimes that send undead enemies to their final resting place, though others just need to be in your inventory, like a ring that unlocks double jumping. Each new feature and function is doled out slowly while progressing up the tower, and the flow of upgrades and new features feels brisk without being overwhelming. For anyone who needs a refresher, the easy-to-use menus have tons of information, including an instruction manual that shows all tutorials, a bestiary, as well as both an equipment and an item menu. With upgrades, abilities, and equipment being rewarded at regular intervals, there's a really hard to describe just fun feeling of progression in Ys Origin. And it'll bring players back to experience all three story perspectives, despite the fact that the dungeon layout doesn't actually change between all the characters. Strangely, Ys Origin never explicitly states that the player can swap between elemental attacks with the switch of shoulder buttons, which is kind of important given the usual method of switching is unavailable during boss encounters. While those bosses are all visually unique, Defeating them feels really rote after the first few. Compounding the issue, as the game lacks healing options, most boss fights boil down to avoiding attacks while getting in lots of charge-up special skills. Hitting aerial enemies is kind of a pain in the butt, and executing the downward strike, which will force them to land on Unica, is not exactly easy. Lastly, there's a fairly significant jump between each difficulty level, and a difficulty level can only be chosen at the start of a run, so trying to find the right level of challenge can be kind of hit or miss. While most of these are small issues and not enough to break the gameplay, they are worth noting as a caution to prospective players. Both visually and orally, Ys Origin is starting to show its age. What was once a lovely game released over a decade ago on PC is starting to wear a little thin around the edges. The game looks smooth in handheld mode, where the smaller size hides some of the blemishes during the story-heavy anime sections. However, while playing the game docked and on a larger television, those cutscenes are starting to look a little tired. In terms of music, the sound team at Valcom hasn't dropped a stitch. But as more expansive music has been seen in the many years since Origin launched in more recent Ys titles, it does kind of start to feel dated in comparison. Though the combat has some minor limitations and the game is starting to wear a little around the edges, Ys Origin is absolutely still worth a look for anyone who somehow dodged previous releases on PC, PS4, Vita, or Xbox One. Honestly, it's one of the most accessible starting points in the Ys franchise as a whole, and doesn't require a huge time investment, as most players can finish a single story run in about 10 to 12 hours. For longtime fans of the Ys series, it's really neat to see where the lore that has become a staple of the series had its, well, origin. We rate Ys Origin on the Nintendo Switch 3.5 out of 5. If you want to know how we rate our reviews, you can check out our review score guidelines available at RPGamer.com. We hope you've enjoyed this video review of Ys Origin. If you want to see more video reviews, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. Is there a game that you would like to see a video review for, particularly an upcoming title? Don't forget to drop your suggestion in the comments below.